Our country is very divided right now.
Folks were physically attacking one another.
The root causes of division go all the way down into our foundation as a country.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
Stop! Stop!
If we're going to live in a democracy, all of us have to learn to be mediators and bridge builders.
My daughter would tell you, let's get on to the issues that she died for.
The divisions are happening in our neighborhoods, they're happening in our schools, and they're happening in our families.
We decided to travel to all 50 states to get an understanding of what was causing these divisions.
Issues we'll inherit are not so much dividing between the left versus right, but really the future versus the past. We decided to create the first ever caucus for young members of Congress.
I want to create a third force in our politics that's able to get us beyond this partisan warfare.
Meeting people across the country who have a passion to see our divisions healed, that gives me hope.
To have someone look at me as if we don't deserve to be respected, we don't deserve to be treated fairly, it does something to you.
We get uranium, we get murder, we get alcohol. Nobody's doing nothing about it.
I wish there was something I could do to help her.
I don't want other mothers to go through this.
This country needs bridge builders.
Don't be afraid to reach out to someone who might not believe exactly like you believe.
What the is up, internet? Thank you very much for joining for another episode of That's the Trailer. Today we have a very special episode that is covering the recently released documentary, The Reunited States. This is a feature documentary that profiles people who have dedicated their lives to promoting depolarization and de-escalation of our tensions across the political divide. It is directed by Ben Recchi and produced by Van Jones and Megan McCain, as well as Raj Krishna and Sol Tryon, who are joining us today.
Yes. Now, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And guys, if you didn't know this for our show, this is our first documentary. It won't be our last, but we are definitely proud of you guys, and thank you so much for coming on. Now, Raj Krishna is a writer, director, and producer. The founder of California Studios, focused on producing content that explores international stories and social justice issues. In 2019, he produced a documentary about social activist Lillian Smith. So hello, Raj.
Torian, hello. Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
No problem.
Thank you for being here. And also with us, Sol Tryon, the producer who has primarily focused his efforts on documentaries aimed at important issues. These are documentaries like 2012, Time for Change, a film about creating a sustainable society. Neurons to Nirvana, a documentary about psychedelic drug research. Weed the People, which details stories of people fighting against medical marijuana legislation. Or I guess the people fighting against the people who are fighting against medical marijuana legislation.
Yes.
Sol has directed my favorite film, which we covered last season, The Live in Wake. So very happy to finally get to talk to you in person, Sol.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yes, sir. Now, coming up in the show, we also have the editors for The Reunited States, Eleanor Goodrich, and of course, Aaron David Port.
All right, now we got everybody introduced. Let's move on to the elevator pitch. So the documentary is based on the book of the same title by Mark Gerzon, and I'm curious where the inspiration came from to turn this into a film.
The inspiration was Ben Recchi, the director, one day saw Susan Bro speak at a convention. And Susan Bro is the mother of Heather Heyer, who was the woman who was killed tragically in Charlottesville when that white supremacist drove his car into a group of counter-protesters. So he saw Susan speak, and he went up to Susan and he said, "Look, I want to tell your story." And he started to think about the perfect title for this film, the story of reconciliation, of healing. And he thought of the title, The Reunited States. And then he thought to himself, this is probably too good to be true. I should Google this and see if there's anything else out there. He Googled it, and then he found Mark Gerzon's book. So he reached out to Mark, and Mark said, "You know what, Ben? I've been waiting for someone for the last 5 years to reach out to me. so that we can make this movie. Let's make this movie. So that's kind of how the movie came to be. And Mark then opened up all the doors to all these people that are in the film.
Awesome. Now, either one of you, let me ask you this: how would you describe the film to recommend it to audience? Because as you guys may already know, this is probably not everybody's cup of tea. But if there was a general audience, how would you describe the film to them?
Yeah, I would say it is a documentary chronicling the emotional journey of everyday Americans as they try to reach across the spectrum, the political divide, and reach across to people who are different from them and try to bridge our divisions in the United States. Over the last 4 years, we've seen tremendous turmoil, tremendous division. We've seen families being torn apart. We've seen physical violence. We've seen an insurrection, for God's sakes, in the last few weeks. And this film is about the journeys of everyday people that are trying to mend those divisions, heal those divides, bring families together, have a conversation with the other person across the other side of the aisle. So it profiles solutions, it profiles everyday Americans and what they're trying to do. And hopefully it leaves the viewer with a sense of, I can also take part in healing some of these divisions, and I can take part by engaging in the same practices that our main characters do, things like listening, things like learning to have a conversation, things like being open-minded and willing to explore. So that's what the film is about.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Is that where I noticed when me and him watched the film together, because normally any film we do, we've already seen it a billion times. But of course, with you guys, we made the decision to sit down and watch it together and take our own notes. Is that where the round table conversation came out? It looks like an AA meeting, but clearly it's not an AA meeting. But everyone's sitting around the table, should I say, in the center, expressing themselves. Is that kind of what you guys aim towards, to everybody to be heard?
Yeah, so some of those scenes in the film that you're referring to, where people are kind of having group conversations and group dialogue, those are actual workshops that are held by some of the people that are profiled in the film. So, for example, the Millennial Action Project, which hosts some of those conferences, they actually bring together partisan lawmakers across both Republicans and Democrats that are young, that are millennials, that are under the age of 30 or less, and actually bring together different groups and facilitate those kinds of dialogues. So those were not conversations or dialogues that were set up specifically for the film. It was more like, just because of our verite documentary style of filmmaking, where we're following our characters, many of our characters are involved in these kinds of more formal bridge building movements that specifically get people across the aisle to come in and have a conversation, and they facilitate and they level set and they set ground rules, and they kind of say, hey, you're interrupting that person, or hey, you're saying something demeaning to that person, please don't do that. Try to de-escalate the tension. So we were just profiling everyday interactions and meetings that actually take place in due course in some of these group settings.
I mean, the movie came at a perfect time. I guess it came at a perfect time if you're looking at it from a rational perspective. If you're looking at it from a far one side or the other, I've seen a lot of comments where, it's like, of course you want unity now. We'll get into that. But what I do want to say is that the premiere, the red and blue carpet premiere, the virtual event that you guys had, I think that was very inspiring. They see the comments and that after, like, it was weird to see so much positivity in an online environment. It was almost like culture shock to see that. Somebody in the comments, or I think it was in the comments or in the actual premiere itself, somebody said, we have an awesome people problem much more than we have an awful people problem. So it was really cool in the midst of an impeachment trial, country clearly divided, to have this one moment in time that it was optimistic. It left me with a feeling of optimism after the red and blue carpet premiere. But all right, let's move on to we do our research. Let's talk about the movie itself, how it got made. I saw on IMDb, and I know you can't always trust exactly what IMDb says, but
the Wikipedia of the film industry.
Yeah, according to that, there was a $1 million budget. Is that around accurate?
I'll let Sol answer that one, because he's a little closer to the finance.
Well, typically we don't talk specifically about budgets in the indie world, especially just because, we work our butts off to try to make a movie at as small a budget as we possibly can, and then we go out and we try to make sales with it or make money from it. And if we say, it costs $10, and then somebody's going to give us $10 for it, and then nobody makes any money and nobody does anything for it. And if we say it costs, but all that said, we were a little bit under $1 million. That was a slightly generous estimation there.
So I've already learned something. That's amazing. So I see what you did there. Hey, listen. Hey, it's a lemonade stand. It costs $2 to run, not 50 cents. I got you. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, and I would just add there that I think I would just echo what Sol is saying and say that a lot of people worked, for example, for no salaries, including myself, and a lot of people put in a lot of sweat equity. So that's where I think if you watch the film and you look at the production value of the film, it feels even higher than $1 million, right? Like we have that scene where Susan Bro visits literally the Senate chamber and gets to meet AOC and Talia Rashid, and she's interacting with them, and we have all that footage, and that was like taken by a cinematographer who has access to the Capitol building. So it's some of these kinds of interactions that we were able to capture, even though it's very much a labor of love, the production value shows on screen. So I think that's larger than life, even though it is very much is an indie production. So I just thought I would say that because a lot of energy and time went into it, even though it wasn't necessarily dollars spent, but it was kind of paid in kind. It was a labor of love.
Yeah, no, we both are on the low level end of independent filmmakers, so I totally appreciate sweat equity, and I mean it had to be costly to go across the country. I mean, it's like a cross-country documentary following multiple people.
I was going to ask a question here real quick, and I want to say this. Let me ask you this, because it's kind of hard to tell, because, again, you have one family who's traveling across 50 states. You have Stephen, which after we did our research, we found out how much he's involved in trying to bring people together, bridge them together. How long did the actual production take itself?
It was about 2 years, 2.5 years, essentially. And we were starting editing maybe 1.5 years into that. So you get to a certain place and you're like, oh, we really need this, or this is happening, and you have to go cover it, and then you have to kind of redo your edit in order to make it fit because we've got this new piece that we didn't know was going to be happening. And I mean, that's documentary filmmaking in a nutshell. It's like, it's very different than narrative filmmaking where everything's scripted, and yeah, obviously there are adjustments and changes along the way, but with a documentary, it's like, you're following people, especially with something like this where there's 4 different storylines that we're really trying to keep track of, these 4 different characters, or more like 5 different characters, all along the way throughout this whole time, and just kind of like gathering information about what they're doing, where they're going, who they're meeting, what's the latest thing that they're up to. And then you go out and you film whatever of it that you possibly can, whenever, wherever, however you can, and then try to bring it together and put it into a story. I mean, sure, there's, we have aims and visions and ideas of what we want it to be, but you have to capture it. You have to go out there and you have to be there and to actually see what they do and they say and who they meet, and then kind of bring it all together. So yeah, it was a long process, and as most documentaries really are. But it was one that was just very organic in the sense that it was really just conversations. I mean, primarily with Ben. I mean, I got to give Ben so much credit for this movie. I mean, he got into this just pure passion out of like the desire to help bring people together in our country, and it just completely took over his world, and he devoted his life to it and just really pushed and was like the driving force in every aspect of this movie. And Raj and I are here to support and do whatever we can and add and how we can pull all the pieces together and make it happen, but Ben is like the heart that makes everything run. I've been friends with him for 20 years, and seeing him kind of really come full circle into the space of like doing stuff that is meaningful to him personally, as opposed to, I'm a filmmaker, I need to go out there and I need to make something that everybody else in the world is going to love. And seeing him, really bring that back into what is important to him, it was really inspiring and something really beautiful for me to see and be a part of.
Me and him both said this. We looked at this and I said, at least for me personally, it's a documentary, but halfway through it, I don't feel like I'm watching a documentary because the cinematography is just so good. Especially, there's some shots with Steven running through the park. I'm like, what is this? Like, what do we watch? Like, it is like just visually, it just takes you like, man, this is really serious. So I just wanted to piggyback on what you guys said and show, I know how much passion you guys put into this. So I at least want to give you credit for that.
Yeah, I think just to add, this was Ben's first documentary, but Ben has done multiple features, including, features that have very high production value, that have 7-figure budgets, that are shot in foreign countries. His last, actually, I've known Ben for several years, and Ben and I started talking when he made Ashram a couple of years ago, which was kind of like his big kind of indie thriller in India. And then he made a film called Watch List, which was a hard-hitting drama, a crime drama about the drug trade in the Philippines, and about a mother who is forced to become an assassin in order to basically get the protection from her children from the corrupt cops. And it's like based on it's like based on like real life events that are happening in the Philippines right now under the new kind of regime there. After I saw that film, I was like, this guy knows how to deliver multi-million-dollar production value on indie budgets, and he's done kind of like these very, very intense, gritty landscape dramas that, you know, have action sequences and intense choreography. So it was after seeing these films, I was like, he's going to make a beautiful documentary. And I think in the documentary, you see some of his skill and finesse, where you have Stephen Olakara running around and he's like running up, you know, he's running up to the statue of MLK and he's running up the steps to the Lincoln statue. And it's like these slow-mo shots. And it's like, wow, this is not a documentary. This is something else. So we definitely were going for that. And I think that's Ben's experience and style kind of coming into play there.
Yeah, a lot of the times documentaries get so information heavy, which is important, but they lose that cinematic value. And there was a very strong cinematic quality to all the shots in this. So the film focuses on 4 stories, like you were talking about. You have Susan Bro, the mother of Heather Heyer, David and Erin Leverton, the Republican family who traveled cross country in the RV. Stephen Olakara, the founder of the Millennial Action Project, and Greg Orman, the independent candidate running for Senate to represent Kansas. I was curious when watching it what was the process like deciding who the focal figures of the movie would be?
Yeah, that was a journey in and of itself, because the original version, the kind of original cut of the film that we did actually had more storylines in there. So we had these kind of 4 kind of core main everyday American storylines: Susan Bro, Stephen Olakara, the Levertons, and Greg Orman, right? These are like very emotional, very personal stories. And then we also had actually sprinkled throughout the film kind of luminaries in the field of polarization. You know, we had a professor from Stanford who was like opening up the first depolarization lab. We had, you know, the CEO of All Sides, which is a tech company that aggregates news from all sources, you know, all into the spectrum. They have right-wing news and left-wing news, and they bring it all together on one portal. So we had all these kind of more academically focused luminaries in the film too. And there were probably, you know, a good 12, 13 characters in there originally. And while it was a really, really solid film, I think what we realized was the heart and soul of the picture and what makes you cry and what makes you engage and what makes you invested is these 4 stories. Right? Not to discount the amazing work that a lot of these folks are doing, but it was these 4 human stories that made us cry, that made us laugh, that inspired us. So we kind of narrowed the focus a little bit to focus on these 4 journeys. But originally we had many more characters in the film.
Was there one story, either you or Sol can answer this, was there one story that didn't make it that maybe one of you guys would have maybe wanted to focus on rather than the core 4?
I would say that there were actually 6, and that's why what we've done is we've created a supplemental miniseries called Everyday Heroes, and it's these 3 to 4 minute little vignettes about each of these 6 characters. And right now we're kind of exploring strategy. We're talking to a couple of different news outlets, and we're trying to see how do we place this kind of supplemental miniseries. But there were these 6 amazing stories that kind of turned into these standalone pieces. And it's a little mini series that we're cultivating called Everyday Heroes that can hopefully help cross-promote the film and can be placed on some kind of a news outlet.
Yeah, let me just add into that I mean, we started with those 4 storylines that were, you know, really inspiring and incredible, and we're always looking for more, and we're always out there trying to find more interesting people, interesting stories, things that other people are saying. We found tons of them, like Raj had mentioned, and we used a lot of them, but we always kept coming back to these 4 stories that we had been following from the beginning. They were all the 4 original storylines that, you know, were chosen. And it was just that sort of thing that was just like, it just felt right. It just always felt right. Throughout the edit, we'd always add in more characters, and we're like, let's go back to this core and bring that back and really keep it and make it about these, you know, they're all everyday people, but these 4, you know, characters really kind of pinpoint a variety of different people within the United States that we felt like all had a voice to say, that were individual voices. Their voices could speak to a specific demographic of people within our country.
The Reunited States premiered, it was the closing night film at the Woods Hole Film Festival, and it'll also be going on to CineQuest Film Festival in September, United Nations Association Film Festival in October. What has the reception have been like at the Woods Hole Film Festival?
Yeah, it was great. Just it was such a resounding and overwhelming emotional response. I mean, we were getting personal messages on Facebook. We were getting emails. The festival director was super welcoming and warm about our film, and we had a lot of conversations with her about it in terms of how to best place it. So yeah, the reception at Woods Hole was great, but I think what was even cooler was the reception across the board at all the festivals that we went to was amazing. So we won the Humanitarian Award at the Rhode Island Film Festival. We won the Best Documentary Award at Atlanta DocuFest. We were in competition at various different festivals. We were the opening night film at CineQuest. And again, everywhere the film played, we always got these very emotional responses and messages, including in some cases from festival directors saying, "I love your film." We've had film festivals come back to us, after the election or during the insurrection and say, "This country needs your film right now. Can we please feature your film as a part of a special series that we're doing in February and March as a part of trying to feature, topics about civic engagement and about the kind of health of our politics." So it was such an overwhelming response, and I think it was heartening, right? Because as independent filmmakers, you make a film and you're kind of sitting with it, and you go through this phase where you apply the film to festivals and you're like not sure if it's going to bounce, if it's going to resonate, even if it gets in, are people going to like it, is it going to be seen? So we kind of went through those ups and downs a little bit, but it was really heartening to kind of see towards the end of it, we had an incredible festival run, an incredible response. The documentary won awards, so that was really gratifying.
All right, let's move on to discussion. All right, now you may proceed.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Candy.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. All right, so with that being said, so let me ask you a question here. Because again, generally what we do is we try to do our research and we find questions that we think people want to know, but I'm going to go a little off script here if you don't mind. The question is what does the Reunited States mean to you? But I don't want to ask you what the documentary means to you. I want to ask you just as a person. I don't need to know your political party, just your moral compass. What does it mean to you to reunite the United States?
Well, I mean, to me, it means that it's really what I can do to better myself to help bring reunification to our country. It's not about what is out there. It's really about what is in here, and it's about what I can learn, what I can grow, the conversations I can have. I mean, I really believe firmly that all of this that we need to do and that we need to have, it's about conversations, it's about experiences in every single moment of our lives that we have it. And if we don't experience that and we don't bring it to the forefront and don't do everything we possibly can at any point, what's the point? I mean, we're not trying to tell somebody else what they need to do in order to help bring the country together. It's really about what we need to do within our own hearts, within our own minds, within our own families, within our communities, in every single interaction we do. And that's really what it comes down to for me.
I feel like that's a very realistic approach, because that's the only thing you really have control over at the end of the day is your own decisions. Raj, same question for you, please.
Yeah, the Reunited States for me is all about what can we do everyday citizens of this country to try to bridge our divisions, because we really don't have a choice. I mean, this is something that I've thought about a lot over the last 4 years. For me, this journey started with 2016 election and kind of just realizing, holy smokes, there's this large swath of people that believe something very different than what I believe, and who are these people and what's going on? And over the years, I've kind of gone through various stages of this journey, from anger to resentment to let's just get rid of all these people to I hate all these people to whatever you want to call it. And one thing that I've realized very recently, in fact, Van Jones, one of our fellow producers on the film, put it beautifully: we need each other. You know what I mean? So it's whenever someone is I don't want to talk to him, or I'm not going to talk to those people, I've realized a good follow-up to that question is, what is the alternative? Is the alternative that you just don't talk to these people and that we just become an even more divided country? And where does that lead, right? So I always kind of come back to what choice do we have? We need each other. We have to make this work. And that's been a big realization for me. So I think understanding what each of us can do in our everyday lives to bridge the divisions, and also the realization that we need each other. I think that's what the Reunited States is for me.
I tell, and that's a very good way of putting it, Raj. I tell people this all the time, is that speaking from my ancestry and where I come from, I didn't get into slavery by myself, or my ancestors didn't get into slavery by themselves, and we didn't get out of it by ourselves. There's documented stories of Rosewood, Florida, to where it wasn't just some Nat Turner uprising. It was, there were Caucasians, there were Africans, everybody was helping everybody say treating a human like this is wrong. And so by you saying that, that's what me and David Durden really wanted to do. We just didn't want to watch the film. We wanted to get to know the people who actually made the film, and I know we had that conversation. Now, one other thing I did want to say was this, is Alan Ng of Film Threat said that the Reunited States is an essential documentary for anyone who's frustrated with the state of politics today, not only Washington, but at home. And I think you guys did a very good job of driving that point at home. I don't want to know what's going on Capitol Hill. We saw the coup, the attempted coup. We saw that. What's going on at home and inside of our hearts is just like you said. So it's not what's going on out there, what's going on in here. So I wanted to ask you guys this. Who do you guys think would be the most receptive to this documentary, and who would you think would be the least receptive to it?
I mean, I think it depends on who's presenting it, like, and how that each person comes across the documentary. It could be somebody, a conservative, Republican, could be introduced to it through the Levertons, and then they have an access point that they can really adhere to, and they can identify with, and that brings them into it that way. Versus it could be somebody on the left that was, outraged by everything that happened in Charlottesville and with Heather Heye's killing, and they got into it through hearing Susan Bro's story. And so it really kind of depends on how the people are approaching it. But that said, I think the core main people that are interested to this or will be drawn to this will be those sort of middle of the pack kind of people, typically mostly, white Americans, that we can speak to each other, that can say, hey, let's look at, we've got racial issues in our country, and we need to die. It's not about finding other people out there to tell us what we need to do. It's about what we can do, and sit here and say, I need to recognize this. I need to recognize the fact that we've got all sorts of issues in our country that me as a white man, I came to here and have all these certain privileges, but I have a responsibility and an obligation to look at what I have and how that came to me in a way that maybe it doesn't come to everybody else that way. And I'm getting a little bit off subject here, but anyways, I think it really, really ultimately depends on what your access point is to the film.
I appreciate that sentiment, because I have, there are black people in my life that have expressed to me that haven't we done enough for you? Now you want us to solve your problem with us? Like, no, go and figure it out. There's literature out there. There's resources. You don't need to trouble me with something you're having an issue with me. That's your problem. I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Now, I did want to say one thing here now. Of course, this is Amazon, and of course, they love you guys. Apparently, everyone on Amazon love you guys, because according to Amazon, there's a flood of support and optimism and with everything that's going on right now. So what I did was I went to Amazon, and basically they had nothing but positive reviews for you guys and a flood of support. So let me ask you this. Now, that's a nice change, because as you know, when this cancel culture and everything that's going on, everyone wants to be so negative. But we wanted to take this time to provide an opportunity to look at both sides of things and to respond to constructively critical statements about the film, and in the spirit of promoting productive discourse.
All right, so the first one I have here, Ben Kinningsburg, New York Times, he said that it was topical in broad strokes, yet frustratingly allergic to particulars. And Nick Shager with the Daily Beast said, so generic is the Reunited States that Recchi doesn't even have anyone specifically define what it currently means in terms of policy stances and cultural attitudes to be a Republican or Democrat. So I'm curious what your response would be to people who feel that the movie is overly generalized, lacking specific examples or instruction for where to go from there.
So I would love to address both of those, and let's start with the New York Times one, because I think that one is a little easier, and that is, I think to a certain extent he's right, because that's life, right? Like, people in life don't go around saying, oh, here's the solution, here's your 5 index cards with your flash words, and memorize them, and you're good to go. Or like, here's the 4-letter acronym. Like, these are real people who in some cases have lost family members to white supremacists, who are traveling the country seeking answers for themselves, right? So, I mean, I remember feeling this way too. I remember kind of feeling like, hey, like, this project in some cases does provide some very tangible examples of like listening and having a conversation and keeping an open mind. And David Leverton in one scene confronts his white privilege. It's such a powerful scene, right? Where he's like, he says, I don't like the words white privilege. And the woman asks him why. And he's like, I don't know, but I just don't like it, right? And you can see he's uncomfortable. And it's those kinds of transformative moments that these characters go through that I think is so important to see. It's so poignant to see. And it's powerful and it's fascinating. But, what is the exact prescriptive thing that you take from that? Is it like, well, white privilege exists and white people need to be made aware of it? I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the right answer. Maybe it is, but I don't know if that's necessarily the lesson that you take away from that scene. So anyway, the broader point that I'm trying to make is that I think that's the nature and style of a lot of Verite documentaries. But I think there's a lot of beauty in that ambiguity, because a lot of different people take away a lot of different things from that ambiguity, right? Like I saw a tweet yesterday where a woman said, I just watched this film with my millennial children, and at no point in the film did they even touch their phones. And there was another tweet that I saw where a woman was talking about how beautiful it was and how she cried throughout the film. So I think it's such an emotional film that I think we'd probably lose a lot of the reality and a lot of that emotional life that it has if we suddenly turn to a talking head who was like, well, now let's talk about, the 4 qualities of, how to bridge the divide, and he takes out a chalkboard and whatnot. So I think that criticism is fair, but just giving you the counterpoint, which is I think that's the nature of Verite documentaries.
No, I agree with you, because there's to try to offer a blanket solution to a problem that is different for everybody, or everybody's at a different place in their journey with with whatever issue there is, to try to offer this is the one-size-fits-all solution that you need to do would just be it. I don't think that would have worked. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's
a nuanced issue, right? Like, we're talking about the political and civil warfare that's happening in this country right now, and it's unfolding on multiple different battlegrounds, right? It's unfolding in social media, it's unfolding in mainstream media, it's unfolding in politics at the federal level, at the national level, it's unfolding in our communities, it's unfolding in our families, right? So it's such a nuanced, multi-layered, multifaceted, historic issue that I don't see how anyone can kind of come out of it with like the easy lessons in the playbook. Now, to address the second review, which I think is far more fascinating and far more scathing, actually, to be honest with you, like the New York Times was actually very, very generous. Hopeful moments in a political war, and it was actually a very generous review. But the Daily Beast tore us to shreds, and we read that and we're kind of thinking, oh, this is interesting, they're calling us like Nazi sympathizers and all this, and I'm kind of looking at this and I'm like, oh, interesting. and then I think on the same day, the Daily Wire publishes their review, and it's pretty much as scathing, if not even more scathing. Now, here you have 2 polar opposite outlets. One of them is essentially a left-wing outlet. One of them is essentially a right-wing outlet. And what was fascinating was these reviews were saying the opposite thing to each other. One was saying, oh, these guys are Nazi sympathizers. And one was saying, oh, these guys are BLM promoters. So I thought that was fascinating, because it was like, wait, like, how can you be both? you know what I mean? So,
oh my gosh.
So I think to a certain extent, those two reviews were perhaps a little biased and perhaps kind of approaching it from kind of a leftist or a rightist mindset. And to Sol's earlier point, our target audience is very much kind of like center, left of center, right of center. We're not trying to, I don't think this documentary is necessarily targeted like at the Proud Boys or like, at the far left. We're not trying to change the like fringes, and like suddenly convert, swaths of white supremacists into becoming like family lovers. I mean, if that happens, great. But it's really targeted at like kind of center left, center right, center, that what's known as the exhausted majority, right? It's like you have 30% of people that are, you know, kind of quite left, 30% that are quite right. You have 40% of people that are like, you know, center majority. And the film actually, in some of the demographics that we've seen resonate well in terms of ads and some of the other kind of data analysis we're running, is women, specifically women over 40. You know, I think that theme of motherhood really resonates, you know, with the through line of Susan Bro and Erin Leverton and kind of, you know, her family and all this stuff. So anyway, coming back to the Daily Beast review, I thought, you know, look, we value all feedback. You know, I would never say, oh, that reviewer is, you know, dumb or anything like that. We value all feedback. I'm sure there were some valid observations in there, but I do think that the Daily Beast and the Daily Wire it's kind of a fascinating case that I think that there is a really interesting like case study for like a political science class or something to look at this film and then look at those two reviews and just go to town on it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I think those reviews say as much or even more about the reviewers and the news outlet's state of mind than it does about our film. You know what I mean? Because it's almost like the film is kind of reflecting back like people's biases, because like what in the film is promoting Black Lives Matter? Like nothing. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's kind of my opinion of the Daily Beast.
Before you go to your next question, I want to say this is because of the fact that what you just said, the only common denominator in those two reviews is they both decided, I think they both preemptively went into the film deciding that they weren't going to like what you did. They just need to figure out what bucket to put it in that they didn't like what you guys were doing. And of course, Black Lives Matter and being a Nazi apologist, that's clickbait if I ever needed it. So with that being said, so I completely agree with you. But the one thing that me and him have always talked about is this, and feel free to use this if you guys ever do a documentary, I will not charge you for this, is that the left wing and the right wing, I hate when people say that, because without both wings, how are we supposed to fly?
Yeah, the plane just...
What you said is so close to something that Mark Gerzon says a lot, which is like, you got your right hand and you got your left hand, and you need them both, right? You need them both. They're both equally important, and it's what gives you your control and your power. So totally agree with you. So, and by the way, on that subject, I think on the subject of kind of having seen the film and critiquing the film, there has been some interesting backlash in the Twitterverse around, you know, hey, I don't want to watch this film, or like, how can you ask me to reconcile? And it's been really interesting.
We'll get there. That's coming up. The social media reaction, and I think
he found that Twitter thread, but he called me like 1 in the morning. Like, I found it. I'm like, oh,
it's not hard to find. They're out there.
There's many of them out there.
And you know, I think anybody that's down the middle can appreciate those sentiments of being accused by the left of being racist, or being accused by the right of being a liberal. And it's like, I can't be both. You have to pick one. And it just, for anybody that's in the middle, it just kind of baffles the people on one far side or the other. All right, but before we move on to the next question, for the sake of being fair and balanced, copyright, for the sake of portraying the full spectrum of reception of the film, I want to sprinkle in some positive reviews after each critical response. So an IMDb user said, I thought this was good. This film is a breath of fresh air from the constant deluge of hate, fear, and division that we constantly receive through our various media sources. Thanks to the team who saw that we needed this film. So there's no question there. I just want to make sure that we're sprinkling a little sweet with the sour here. So moving on to, this is Joel Copeland of Spectrum Culture. And the reason why I wanted to bring these up is because I think that there's, you know, the people that are on the far side of either side, I'm hoping that maybe some of them will hear this and understand. I want this information to be out there for the people that have these criticisms.
David, who initially dislikes and distrusts the phrase, big quotation marks here, white privilege on principle, and Aaron, who similarly distrusted anyone who reasoned to utter the sentence Black Lives Matter. They do transform on this journey, however, according to him, but mostly for themselves and the podcast that seemingly results from it. So I would ask both of you, what do you say to those who have an instinctual, cynical response towards the intentions or adversely the results of the subjects in the film?
I mean, one of the main things with this is like the Levertons, they're gonna do what they do, and they're going to speak to people that they can speak to that is in their world, right? So why would you want them to try to go out and speak to somebody that is not in their world? They're not going to be able to connect with them. They're not going to be able to identify with them. So they're working towards communicating with the people in their communities. And all of the different characters operate in that same sort of way, right? So being able to like connect with people in a specific way. I mean, sure, you can go ahead and you can like discredit what they're doing because, oh, hey, they're you know, are fairly wealthy. They can sell their home and buy an RV and drive around with their family for a year, and that's just something they decide to do. You could look at it that way, but you can also say, hey, look, they're taking their privilege and what are they doing with it, and how are they integrating that into their worlds, and how are they using it to be able to communicate with people to help change the world. And that's how they're doing it. And I think, you know, look, you can always tear people apart in any way you want to ultimately, but if you really look at what those individuals are doing and how they're doing it, and you find, you know, that they're actually exploring aspects of their world, getting out of their comfort zone in a way that people in their communities don't normally do, you know? And that's an inspiring thing. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's incredibly powerful. Even though it's, you know, it seems like it's a privilege in a sense, right? But how do you use your privilege? How do you use the platform you have? How do you use the intelligence you have? How do you use the opportunities you have? How, you know what I mean? It's like, we all have different gifts. We all have different circumstances, and it's how we use them. And that's the most important piece of it all to me.
That's a beautiful way to put it, because I mean, as I was watching it, as a man that is constantly checking his bank account to make sure electric is going to be paid, my gut reaction to the Levertons was like, oh, how nice it must be. But that's perfect what you said, because there's no responsibility on them to do what they did. They didn't have to take that money and do anything socially aware with it. They could have used that money and just went on another vacation like many people do. So that's a great perspective on them, that there's no reason that they had to do that. It was a choice that they made, and the fact that they have money doesn't make that choice any less virtuous.
Now, I will say this: another IMDb user said, a very important film for this time, emotional and heartfelt. And Sol, I want to speak to what you just said, as he said, because we both watched the film, and it's like we said the same thing. Wouldn't it be nice just to quit my job for a year and go do this and go do that? But I always tell people this: one thing is, number one, you're dealt the hand that you're dealt. Don't get mad when you get pocket aces, and don't get mad when you get 2-7. This is your hand. Life is a poker game. You can always bluff your way through it. No one knows your cards. But with that being said, I will say this, is that you did open my eyes to at least look at it this way. I can't speak from a place of white privilege. However, there are people that can speak from it, and it's what we do with what we've been given. And we talk about this CTC, control the controllables. Whatever I didn't want to see. We talked about like what really urban areas do they go to? When do they really get in as what we call the shit? But you know what? Hearing you say that, I wouldn't want to see them go pretend to be in these areas. Don't go here and for 2 minutes and make it seem like you were there and you understood, because you don't understand. However, if we peel back layer by layer, let's start here, let's visit these states, and then let's go a little bit deeper and deeper, because they can speak to a crowd that I can't speak to. As articulate as I speak, as nice as I dress, I can get in front of a crowd of people who've never seen me, and they'll tone me out, but they'll listen to the Levertons, and that's just one step of getting closer to where we're trying to go.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think their journey is multifaceted, right? I mean, it's not like they're traveling to Disneyland. Like they go to a Navajo reservation and they meet someone who is serving homeless people, and someone who was in prison. And there was actually a pretty long sequence that was in an earlier cut of the film, where the Levertons do go to Skid Row in LA, and they do spend a lot of time on Skid Row with homeless people, with people of color. So yeah, I mean, it's a very kind of emotional and dark journey for them, really. Yes. I think coming back to the kind of I think what was the original question, which is like, what would you say to the people who are cynical about the characters in this film, the stories in this film? I would say, just watch it. What do you have to lose, right? Like you can be cynical about everything and anything, but like, just watch it and form your own opinions. You're welcome to watch it and say, look, like, I don't agree with that approach. That's the entire point of the film, is that we would not discard that point of view. We would say, okay, really interesting. Tell us more. How would you do it? How would you try to bring the country together? So from that point of view, I don't really think there's there's been a lot of like comments online, which I'm sure we're going to talk about like, oh, I don't want to watch that. Like, this is not the time for unity, or like, where were the demo rats, like, for the last 4 years, like stuff like that. And to that, my response is just watch it. Like, what do you have to lose? It's a 2-hour movie. If you don't agree with it, so be it. But you might actually learn something. You know what I mean? Like, read a book instead of spending time on social media, like trolling films that you haven't seen, or watch a movie. You know what I mean? Like, so that would be my response to those people.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, and that's the last critical response that I have to bring up is it's an umbrella blanket statement of this slew of comments on Instagram, Facebook, of people that probably have not taken the time to see the film. They've judged it before actually watching it. And these are most of the comments I saw. I'm going to presume they are right-leaning users, but you have these sentiments on both sides where, well, on the right side, there's this resentment for the call for unity. They assume that this is coming out now because, oh, now that your guy's president, now you want us to all unite. Well, it's too late for that. And then on the other side, there's, I know people that are like, if you are still ignorant to the fact that Native Americans suffered injustices, or if you don't understand the plight of the black man and the history of that culture, at this point, I've washed my hands of you. Your ignorance is almost more offensive to me than racism itself. So there are these sentiments from one side to the other, and they're largely expressed in this on the social media sphere surrounding the movie. So I want to take the time to address that, and this is 2 questions. The first one is, those voices seem to be the most vocal on social media. Like, if you were to just live in social media, you would think the whole world is like this. But I'm wondering if you believe, like, you guys have been across the country in the process of making this movie. Do you see that on an individual level? Do you think that's an accurate representation of the country? And the second question is, do you think that this movie, or anything for that matter, could even begin to build a bridge that's long enough to stretch from that one far side to the other far side?
Yeah, I mean, Sol, do you want to start?
I mean, sure. I guess, the second part of that is resonating with me more in the sense of like, do we expect to be able to build a bridge from one extreme to the other? And the answer is no. I mean, I don't think there's any way that could possibly happen, Like, it's really about a matter of, I will say, the optimist in me would say, well, look, we want to speak to all the people in the middle, and then those people will speak to their people, and those people will speak to their people, and eventually we might hit to all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and then it's like we've built that bridge. But that's not a realistic kind of like goal. I mean, sure, yeah, maybe that'll happen occasionally, but that's not really the goal with the film, and that's not the goal with what people that are in this space are trying to do. They're trying to create conversation. It's all about conversation. It's all about bringing people together, having these conversations, exploring different ideas, thoughts, ways we can go about lives, what we can do to be able to like just make our worlds better for us and those around us. And then those concentric circles can spin out wherever they possibly can, and that's great. But the answer of being able to go from one extreme to the other, I don't think that's a reality for anybody to be able to really try to do right now. We want to we want to go out there. I want to listen to people on the far left and listen to people on the far right and use the best ideas from both sides to be able to make our country the best it can possibly be. But you're not going to be singing Kumbaya with each other every step of the way. No, we can argue, we can, fight, we can do all of those things. That's where positive, good ideas come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I would to answer the first part of the question, like, is the social media response kind of indicative of what everyday people are saying? I would say yes and no, in that, like, I think there is a large majority of people that are receptive, that are open, that are engaged in dialogue, that are just not outright rejecting the idea of a movie on unity. Like, a lot of people are watching the film, a lot of people have responded well to the film. And then you have this other camp, which I don't know, is 20% of people, 30% of people, whatever it is, who are just outright rejecting the idea of unity. On the left, it's about, oh, like, are you asking me to suddenly excuse an insurrection? And on the right, it's about, well, you, like, demon rats is the one that I was called the other day. You demon rats are like, asking for unity after a 4-year witch hunt or whatever it is. I don't think those comments are reflective of the kind of average person, but I do think that there are a large number of people on either end of the spectrum that are just not willing to listen right now. And I think that kind of speaks to two things. It speaks to, number one, the moment that we're in and how relevant this movie is for this moment. I mean, if you have literal people who are like, I'm so angry right now that I don't even want to have a conversation, that's how divided the country is, then of course you need a movie about how you fix that problem, right? So I think that's the kind of first thing. And then the second thing is, I would say that those are the people that need to see it the most. You know what I mean? Like, why are you rejecting something because, you know, without even understanding really what it is? Like, how are you so angry that you're not even willing to have a conversation? Like, that something, there's been some breakdown in the social fabric of our country and our discourse that has gone so horribly wrong. So I think from that point of view, it's a really interesting psychological case study. You know, who are these people, and like, you know, why are they so unwilling to even, you know, consider the idea of having a conversation? So I think, you know, just some thoughts for you.
For 3.5 years, like, we didn't know Trump wasn't going to win this next election. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They're not hearing that. They are not.
Oh no, they're still fighting. Yeah, they're still fighting. They're definitely still fighting. Wow, that is. You guys both hit it on the point right there. I definitely like that.
I wanted to end this segment on a positive note from commonsensemedia.org. I think they said it pretty perfectly. They said, unlike many political documentaries, this one is truly the middle of the road, urging discussion, friendship, and conversation over rhetoric and partisanship. It posits that by truly knowing and caring for people across ethnic, racial, and socio-political spectrums, people can be more empathetic and understand one another.
To speak to that, David, to what you just said, is actually Raj hit it right on the nail, which is that the moment we can't have a debate, which is basically two intelligent people, not even intelligent, it's two decent having people having a conversation. The moment you can't debate, war is the next, is after that. So the moment we stop talking, it's nothing but fighting. So we got to always talk. Like you just said, at what point did we not even want to talk anymore? That's the problem.
Pop quiz, hotshot. Here are a few steps to take to be the change we need in the world. You can find this information and take the pledge at reunitedstates.tv. Part 1. Yourself. Politics is just like any other relationship. It all starts with you. There's one rule above all else. You can't change other people. You can only change yourself. When we think of divisions, we tend to blame other people. They are the ones being unreasonable, or they are the ones causing these divisions. But the truth is, we're all a part of this. Each of us is either dividing or uniting. We increasingly view the other side not just as opponents, but as enemies, as dangerous to the nation, as a threat to democracy. The irony is, the other side thinks the same thing about us. But since you can't change the other side, perhaps the question should be, what can I do to be a part of the solution? Challenge your stereotypes. We tend to oversimplify, group together, and disparage large groups of people, which is itself a form of prejudice. The solutions? Tell yourself that the other side is more varied than the stereotype. Acknowledge that their political views are more complicated than the rhetoric you've been hearing. Recognize that the life experiences informing their views are different from your own. Develop relationships with a variety of people who differ from you politically. Read and listen to thought leaders on the other side who present complex arguments. Make distinctions. Try to separate out what you actually have a problem with, instead of grouping frustrations together. Make distinctions between positions and people. You can believe that a viewpoint is wrong without thinking that everyone who holds it is not smart. Make distinctions between policies and values. Policies are a means to an end, not the values themselves. People can differ sharply on policies, yet will have similar goals. Make distinctions between leaders and supporters. You can disagree with a political leader without dismissing all of their supporters. It is overgeneralizing to say, because you support X, you are a bad person. Media consumption. Nearly all newspapers, television, websites, and radio stations are driven by ratings. which often lead to producing the type of content that keeps you engaged. So, our own tendency to pay attention to danger disproportionately amplifies negative news. The solutions? Take a break. If you find yourself stressed or anxious by the news, it's okay to take a media fast and take stock of how you feel. Read a variety of viewpoints. In addition to your own viewpoint, consider adding a variety of media to understand the other point of view. Their interests versus yours. The media's objective is to keep you engaged. Your objective is to stay informed of the truth. These two are not always aligned. This distinction can be helpful to maintain objectivity. Social media. One of the greatest challenges of our time is how we process and engage in social media. People say things online they would never say in person. It can damage our relationships, our view of reality, even our own reputations. This is especially true when it comes to political conversations online. Avoid politics. Ideology is more nuanced than short sound bites. It's okay to skip discussing politics to maintain healthy relationships. Or at the very least, create smaller groups to share more emotional responses. Verify sources. Disinformation can look very real. Check the sources, especially before sharing or forwarding. Don't take bait. What we read often triggers a response that is hard to resist, and we can find ourselves in a thread that spirals out of control. It's okay not to take the bait. There is seldom a productive outcome. Reflect before posting. Is what you're about to post going to cause anger? Would a person from the other side be hurt or upset? If the answer is yes to the above, consider rewording or not posting. Choosing your words. Avoid the following when communicating within your own group or towards others. Avoid demeaning labels like racist, libtards, snowflakes, zealots. The phrase "they all" or Democrats/Republicans makes everything black and white when we live in a gray world. Avoid painting all supporters with the same brush. If you go on a rant about a particular politician, make it clear that you are not putting all supporters into the same box. Part 2. Conversations. Remember, you can't change other people. You can only change yourself. If you go in with the intention to change someone's mind, it will inevitably lead to conflict and frustration on both sides. Instead, go in with the goal of understanding where the other person is coming from. Respect, curiosity, and openness often elicit the same from the other person. Everyone needs to save face. Try not to portray anyone as ignorant, self-serving, or bigoted. Even very different people might have some shared values that can be discovered. Expectations to abandon. That you can persuade the other person to change their core attitudes and beliefs. That you will agree on everything and logic will follow. That your conversation partner will mirror your openness. And here are the 4 skills of political conversations. 1. Set a constructive tone. 2. Listen in a way that the other person feels heard. 3. Say what helps the other person hear you. 4. Handle difficult moments. Part 3. Family. Why family dynamics are more complicated than other relationships. Identity. Because we see a part of ourselves in them, we may feel especially disturbed or ashamed about their political beliefs. No choice. We don't get to choose our family or their political opinions. It's one of the few places we can't sort ourselves. History. Family members have backstories, old resentments, and dynamics that can influence current political conversations. Strategies for dealing with politics in the family. Differentiate. Remind yourself that they are not you. They do not have to change for you to feel okay. Prepare and practice. Because family patterns are usually consistent and predictable, you can prepare and practice how to respond differently. Avoid regression. Nobody can make you regress into your old self. Only you have control over that. Protect your boundaries. Don't let yourself get baited into a political conversation when you are not in the right frame of mind. You get to decide when to engage in a back and forth conversation. Congratulations on taking the first steps on your journey to bridge divides. A few things to keep in mind as you continue. All of us recognize division is a national crisis in our country. Very few of us recognize our own role in it. The truth is, we are all either part of the problem or part of the solution of polarization, dependent on our thoughts, words, and actions towards the other side. Ask yourself, am I unconsciously dividing us or actively uniting us? Every interaction matters. Every moment is a choice. It's going to take all of us doing our part every day to overcome divisions. Being a bridge builder takes time, self-awareness, and hard work. You've just taken the first steps. Continue the journey at reunitedstates.tv and take the Heal America pledge today. The next segment is 7 Minutes in Heaven. This is where we typically talk about our favorite scenes in the movie. I think with this one, what I'd like to do is each of us share what story resonated the most with us. And I will go first.
It was my turn. Why would you do that?
Because I'm going to go first. I'm going to exercise my white privilege.
No, I know what this is. You took mine and you want to say it. You stole my thunder, which is going on. But go ahead. Fine. Please.
So the story that I think had the largest impact on the way I looked at the world was the Levertons, because I grew up in trailer parks, which is you have the whole cultural spectrum in one lot, and you grow up with everybody's history. And so I've always operated under the assumption that everybody has the same worldview that I do, at least in terms of understanding what other people are going through. And it was very eye-opening to me, especially after they left the Indian reservation. And I think David Leverton said something like, I had no idea that, it was that bad, or something like that. Like it took them actually seeing it in person to fully understand and appreciate what's going on there. And that just blew my mind, because until that moment, I've been going around in the real world just assuming that everybody understands everybody else's situation, at least to some degree. And then from that point, they make the decision, I don't like this person, I like this person, or I'm indifferent. But I at least thought that they were making those decisions based on some kind of understanding, and the Levertons are good people. It's not like they've been trying to avoid understanding these things. So that was just, it was really eye-opening to me to see a family that are in all sense of the definition a good well-rounded American family, and they did not know that these things were a part of I guess but you just don't really appreciate the weight of it.
That resonated with, after me and you talked and I left your home that night watching it, I know we had our mind. Put it this way, this is not, you guys have done something that I've never seen before. I love film and I love documentaries. This is the first documentary where I said, and he said it first, we got to go back and watch it again. You can't just give this a once over, because again, seeing the title, you think one thing, but this was the first time that you guys did something that I had never seen before. You actually showed me, how do they say ignorance is bliss? Mm-hmm. I don't think they were willingly ignorant. I think they just did not know, and because that spins the spectrum, because you have people from my community who think that anyone that just doesn't know, they purposely don't want to know, and they purposely are hateful. But that's not the case. I didn't get that from them. So it was one of the few times I saw, okay, you don't come off as racist. You don't come off as spiteful. You come off as just like, you just don't know, because you've been protected by so many barriers in the system that you would not know. So how can I tell you to feel for your fellow man when you do not know what your fellow man is going through? Now, it's still a responsibility to find out, because Thankfully, not even thankfully, for some reason, I didn't have to figure out what racism was. I was born into it. I didn't have to Google it. Google did not have to be around for it. But for them, if you've never experienced it, how could you know? It could all be a ploy. It could all be false.
Yeah, it really opened my eyes to how insulated our singular vacuums of information can be as we're all associating with each other on a daily basis. I mean, like even that the documentary about social media, how we are all, they're curating the news for us, and we're all living in like different realities essentially. And like I've heard that a million times, but until watching the story of the Liebertons, it really hit home to me that how real that is, that's happening.
And Sol or Raj, if you guys could tell us which story resonated most with you, and then I'll go, and then we'll have chance for either one of you guys as well.
Well, there's so many, but I mean, let me give you a couple of options for just what really resonated with me. So the first one was Stephen Olakara, right? Because he's a second generation Indian American like me, and just the work that he's doing and the kind of journey that he's gone through and the sacrifices, like to spend your entire career literally in service of this kind of an organization that's dedicated to building this kind of bipartisan coalition of young Republican and Democratic lawmakers, and the success that they've had. And you see his very emotional personal story where he kind of is a musician also, and he kind of like thinks about politics and music together. So I think that just kind of struck a chord with me, because you see like one challenge that I've always kind of faced and had is like I have brown skin, right? And like I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York, went to UCLA. I lived in India for a few years and a bunch of other countries. And I've always kind of had this inkling of like, maybe I'm an outsider, maybe I'm an American. And like, I've always felt like I'm an American and that I can call this home. But I started to question that in 2016, and specifically not question it because I didn't want it to be home, but question it because of the whole Muslim ban thing. And I'm not a Muslim, but do you know if I'm not a Muslim? Because you can't really tell, you know what I mean? So that's what scared me. And after I started to kind of ask myself these questions of like, what does it mean to be American? Questions that I've always asked in myself my whole life growing up. But then after the 2016 election, started to kind of feel that way. It was just so heartening to see that, like, yes, I am an American, and there are Americans that look like me. And being American is not about the color of your skin. It's not about how rich or poor you are. It's about that. It's about just that ideal of striving to be better, of trying to build a family, of trying to love and to heal and to be a part of this nation. So that for me was really close and kind of hit home. And then I think the second one was just the story of Bear, right? The gentleman on the Navajo reservation who kind of serves food to homeless people. And that one scene where he says, we get uranium, we get drugs, we get alcohol, and no one's doing nothing about it, right? That scene, there's actually, I think, an F word that was taken out of that scene, just to make the movie a little bit more family friendly. But like, I mean, Jesus, like that is such a punch every time I hear it, because it's like, there are literally people living on Navajo reservations, homeless. And if you've read a people's history of the United States, or if you've read about what was done to the American Indians that were here when essentially the white settlers came, and it is harrowing, you know what I mean? And to this day, those people are suffering. And like, you kind of hear about it in like bits and pieces, but this was the first time that I'd seen it, and it still hits me like a sack of bricks every time I see it. So I think that for me was an emotionally harrowing scene.
And the premiere was so powerful, because when Bear came on and it checked in with him, it was such a hit to the gut that this is like, you see it in a movie and it's cinematic form, you can kind of remove yourself a little bit, like I'm watching a film. But then you're reminded at the premiere, you see him come on, he's still living this, like in the thick of it. Long after the credits have rolled and the crew is gone, it's a reminder that he is still there in this reality. I thought, and to see the flood of support come in the comments of like, how can we help him? Where do we send money to? What can we do? That was very uplifting.
To me, I think the biggest thing that puts both of our sentiments together is that the year is 2020, and I know it's 2021 now, but the year is 2020, and they just got rid of the name Washington Redskins. I think that tells you how far we have to go, and that owner fought tooth and nail to get rid of it. Can you imagine Like the Chicago Blackskins?
No.
Exactly. Thank you. So with that being said, real quick, I want to tell
I although I am now.
Oh, well, stop thinking that. It's after 6 o'clock. You can think what you want. Inside joke. So with that being said, really quick, the one that resonated with me was, just like you, Raj, you saw someone that looked like you. I have brown skin, but it was the young lady, when the Levertons went and they visited the young lady who said that she lost her first child because she was not given the medical care that she deserved. To me, listen, I have a young daughter. She's 18 now, and I only have one child, and she means the absolute world to me. And I mean the absolute world to me. And I can't imagine her not being here because she didn't get not the American right, not the Spain right, not the Russian right, the human right to decency for your child to. I mean, damn it, we already have to deal with this our whole life. Can we at least be born into the shit? Can we get to the shit? There's certain people that even didn't get to the shit. And then when you do your research and you dig deeper, you figure out that there were doctors, or so-called doctors, I call them butchers, that looked nothing like me, that experimented before the Holocaust for years upon years upon years. They experimented on slaves. And don't get me wrong, yeah, I'm happy that there are vaccines now. Yeah, I'm happy that there's penicillin and all this other stuff. But how many eggs did we have to break to get to this damn omelet? How many human eggs were broken to get this omelet? When I saw that lady's story, that her child could not be born, limitless possibilities, a child that could have cured polio, cured AIDS, Dr. CB, could have done all these things, was not allowed to at least have that. Dude, it broke me, man, because there's so many other women out there like that don't get that treatment. It just kills me, man. So that's the story that resonated most with me, and I took something from that documentary that I think needs to be talked about more. So that was that for me. Soul.
Yeah. It's interesting. Stephen Olakara as well for me it resonated a lot, not because I identify with the skin color or his particular plight in life, but just for the fact that he's talking about politics being young versus old and not left versus right and these sorts of things. And, me personally, I've been more on the extreme kind of left side of stuff, and almost to an anarchist kind of point where before 2016, I was like, everything's got to be ripped apart and the whole thing's got to be broken. We got to start over. And then we got Trump, and I was like, shit, maybe that's not the right thing to do.
Dude, yes.
And then I see Stephen Olakara coming out and talking about like, hey, this is really about young versus old. We've got this power. We have so much more invested in the future and all of these sorts of things. And I'm not young anymore, but at the same time, it's like, that's really what it's about. It's about the future. It's not about the antiquated old age people that are out there trying to make their money for their families and have their history and written in books and all that sort of bullshit. It's about like, how do we move forward? How do we find ways to bring people together and make lives better? And that's what I saw Stephen Olakara doing, and I thought that was really inspiring and something that really spoke to me.
It also spoke to the executive producer, correct? Because that's how he started the documentary. Remember, we were like, "Oh, okay, it's an infomercial before it starts." Yeah, remember, because he was talking about like, listen, he said something before we even started. He said something because the ladies from The View had him backed into a wall, and all I remember him saying is like, "I'll take a picture with anybody." I'm like, "Whoa, I know you didn't mean it like that." The Grand Wizards might not be okay with that, but I get what he was saying. Like, listen. Let's start. I don't want to talk about the problems. What's the solution?
Yeah, I'm right in line with you, Sol. I was super. Destroy everything, start over. Trump became president. He was like the extreme moderator for me. I was like, okay, maybe absolute chaos isn't the way to go here, no matter what way it's going. We'll try to breeze through. We're gonna move on to you're gonna need a bigger boat. We just want to quickly, 15 seconds each, and we'll get into Cast Crew Review. I just want to share each of us share like a line from it, a point that was made that made that stuck with us the most. And you can go first.
Thank you so much. I think it's been said 3 times, so I guess everybody. I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar where I'm going with here. It was when my guy here, Mr. Leverton, said when someone said, "Well, that's white privilege," and he was like, I don't really agree with that term. It wasn't like white hood racist. It was just like, you don't want to hear the truth. And it goes back to what Sol says. Listen, it's okay to have it. It's what you do with it. Just because people who had white privilege in Rosewood, Florida, chose to rise up. And they stopped other counties from coming in and saying, you're not going to bring that racist bullshit here. Now, granted, they did say I'm paraphrasing here, our niggas act right. They ain't doing no crazy shit. But for the most part, they were on the stepping stones of trying to do the things the right way. So that was the line for me.
All right. I have 2 lines from Susan. She said 2 things that were so awesome. She said, hate is caustic to the person who hates. I thought that was magnificent.
Very
and there was one moment where she said to somebody, I knew if I could just come talk to you, I could find the human being on the other side. And I think in the social media world that we're stuck in now, that needs to be a bumper sticker on everybody's car. Like, before you get into some shit with somebody online, think about them as a person in person right in front of you and what they're going through, and then go from there. Raj, how about you?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and it's funny, like I was struggling to think of an example just because, like, you know, we've lived and breathed the movie, and it's all kind of a huge blur at this point. But there is one that stuck out to me, and that is when Susan Bro meets the Reverend Robert E. Lee, who's a descendant of the original, you know, Confederate General Robert E. Lee, and he actually says, or Susan explains, when I first met Robert, he apologized for his ancestry, and then Susan responds, don't apologize, do something about it, right? So that to me kind of hit me, because it's like, look, let's, like, no, we're not here to accuse, even if you were a racist, we're not here to accuse you and, like, you know, make you, like, repent. Like, let's all just move ahead. Like, let's understand each other and move ahead. You know what I mean? So I think that to me was compelling, because it's Susan has a very practical kind of forgiveness in her tone. And I think that kind of came out in that sentence.
She lives and breathes that it's not about me.
Oh, yeah.
To focus on them. There was kind of like it became a running joke for us as we're watching her in the documentary. Is like, every time she could accept a compliment as well as she can accept an apology. It's like, no. As soon as someone said, thank you, Susan, no, not really. It's this. Or look at this.
Someone would be like, you're so strong. The strength is in the unity that we got to provide together. Like, don't give. I'm like, all right, you know what? Yes, that's it. Yes.
No opportunity missed. How about you, Sol?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Susan as well is strong for me on this. I think, like, being a parent and having children and seeing her say that, you know, the only reason people are up in arms about her child dying is because she's white. It's really something powerful to me, and it's like, man, if I lost a child and I had the ability to talk like that, I mean, I don't think I ever would be able to. And it was so inspiring for me to see her go through that trauma and that incredibly difficult experience and have the realization and the awareness to say, hey, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than what happened to my personal family. And it's happening to people all over the place all the time, but they aren't talking about it because of the color of their skin. And that's like a major, that's powerful to me. That's really something that resonated. And I like, yeah, it gives me chills even thinking about it, because obviously the personal aspect of your child is the, you know, that there's no, the saying that, you know, your child is your heart living outside your body is more than true, you know?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this real quick. Did it remind you of, you remember, because we talked about this movie, A Time to Kill? Remember at the end, Matthew McConaughey says, he does this whole soliloquy, and at the end he says, now imagine if she was white. And that's the reason why Sam Jackson's character got acquitted, because he said a crime about a child being raped, and the whole jury thought the child was black. And at the end they were like, I don't care. And at the end he was like, now imagine if she's white. 5 seconds later, Charles Lee Haley is innocent. He's innocent. Like, the whole world sees it different now because it was put in different eyes. What do you do with your privilege? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't see that movie, but
That's I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's okay.
I do recall, actually, I think when I was a kid, my mom read me the book.
Okay. Yes. It's way more graphic than you got the spirit. Then you already know what happened. And there you go.
I mean, that's a pretty intense book for, you know, to be read
right.
as a child. So
right. What's going on?
But I remember
where was Tom Sawyer? What's going on?
Time for bed.
I don't know.
Okay, all right, let's move on to Gas Crew Review. We are going to bring Eleanor Goodrich and Aaron David Port in for the editors of the Reunited States. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them in now.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey. Hello. We have our first duo. We've never had 2 in 1.
Right now we do.
Oh, us? Yeah, no, be you. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yes, hello, yes.
Aaron and Eleanor.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. All right. Eleanor Goodrich and Aaron David Porter edited The Reunited States. They are a filmmaking couple who have been working on projects since 2011, writing, directing, producing, editing, and starring in a number of short films over the years. So my first question is, two filmmakers under one roof. How does that work?
You want to take it?
Sure. One thing I will say before we answer the question is never have we been asked this question before, especially by anyone who's done research on it. So I feel like we finally made it. Is that what that means?
Welcome.
It's the big moment for me. But I guess for my angle, I think a lot of people talk about creativity in films as if there's a limited amount of creative control to go around. And I feel like that may be true for some people, but at least in our job, it was like, we just got so much to do. Someone needs to do it, and it's just so fulfilling to be able to work on such a supportive team of people that have ideas, because if you don't have ideas, you don't have a film, I guess.
Okay.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, as opposed to, I could definitely see there being a space of oh, I wanted to make this decision, or I wanted to do this, but for us, we're both oh, you want to do that? Great. There's plenty of work. And we also kind of take different, I tend to like storytelling, so I'll be off in this big picture idea, and Aaron's going to be really particular about oh, but did you notice that color is just a little off, and we should go back and catch that.
Yeah. So a little bit more technical versus big picture.
I was more so curious about because film is such an all-consuming thing to get involved with. There's no oh, I'm just gonna work on a movie and I'll focus on real life in between. No, when you're in it, it is a full investment. So with my wife and I, she's not a filmmaker. She puts up with my filmmaking. So I'm wondering, when there's two filmmakers under the same roof, is there anything other than film?
Eleanor does graphic design. I do some music. We do.
It gets pretty all-consuming.
Yeah, well, especially when we're in it, But I guess personally, I think you can apply the same principles from any creative project to any other one, as long as you're kind of looking at them in broad strokes. So, am I going to, I recently got into coffee roasting, and I feel like it's the same kind of okay, it's a technical process, but there's also a creative side to it, and it's I'm gonna do this on this time, and then, and then I've got some editing to do later, or vice versa, I don't know. It just works out pretty evenly if you look at it as part of your you got lots of different things you're balancing at once.
So let me ask this: in between coffee roasting and storytelling, how did you guys get involved with the Reunited States?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, an editor friend from film school, said that someone is looking for some assistant editing work. And we were interested in learning more, and so we met with Ben.
But I want to back
up
this
for a
up.
second.
So to truly understand the ridiculousness of this situation, at least for me, I feel like you have to go back 2 years or 3. We had moved to Los Angeles, and we were realizing how we're both from very conservative areas, and I'm from a very conservative rural area. And so I was expecting going to South Central would be really different. And instead, we saw all of these similarities between, especially working class people, but just people in general across the country. And we were like, we don't have as much different than we think. We should make a documentary. Why don't we do that? And then we did school and we did other things, and time went on. And years later, we have this coffee meeting with Ben Reiki, and he's describing this documentary about how we have so much in common and we should really come together. And he's just done all of the filming. And it was like,
Yeah, it's just, great documentary for us to work on. And Eleanor was telling some of her friends back home that she was working on this, and they were like, oh, wow, yeah, you were telling me about that project a couple of years ago. And she's like, actually, it's a different project that's actually happening. And here we are.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So it's clearly an important film, but what is the most important aspect of the film to you?
It was really powerful for us to be on board with the whole team is really on board with the mission of this film, that we're reaching across divides and trying to understand different sorts of perspectives at a time that we're just really not getting that. And it was so refreshing, because if you look on the news or you look anywhere else, you're not seeing this. And anytime we were talking with our team or we were working on this film, we were talking about those shared perspectives. We were re-grounding ourselves to where regular Americans are today in the country, as opposed to what we're seeing on the news. And I think being able to share that same grounding with other people through the work of these incredible, if you've seen the film, then there's just so many people that are doing so much day-to-day work while we're sitting behind our computers and editing. We just wanted to be able to share that.
Yeah, and for me, it's an element of doing justice to the people who are doing the work that are being highlighted in this project, doing justice to the people who are capturing and elevating that footage, the producers and director and cinematographers and such, but also doing justice to the audience in terms of turning it into a digestible story that people would be interested in hearing about, and so it's like balancing all these perspectives and coming up with a creative workflow that allows everyone to collaborate. Mm-hmm. And for us to be, I guess, storytelling in an iterative. Each version is better than it was previously. Basically, we're making progress. It was a tremendous thing to be a part of. And it was cool to model what we were trying to elevate in terms of collaboration and listening in our actual work, in terms of integrating all of this into something that people can stream and watch.
Now, I wanted to ask this really quick, and again, this either Sol or you guys or Raj can answer this. Now, I've been watching this man edit for over 20 years, and he's gotten better at each year. He's gotten better, and better. With that being said, the final cut of this film is, if I'm not mistaken, 84 minutes. As we all know, that doesn't mean you had 84 minutes of footage. So I wanted to know, how much footage did you guys' crew have to work with, and was there a longer cut of this film that was cut down?
Yes. You can tell the truth, guys. It's okay.
If you can speak to it.
I spent about an hour today going through the footage to try to count up how many hours there was. So, in terms of footage that we were working with, there was just over 365 hours of footage.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But not all of that was original footage. Some of it was licensed. And some of it was stock footage. So in terms of original footage that documentary team captured, it was, I think, 254, just over that.
That's so cool, Aaron. I didn't know those stats. I knew it was over. I knew it was over 200, but I didn't realize it was quite that. At one point, Aaron and Eleanor produced kind of one hour cut downs of each main character. Which we kind of used to kind of study the backbone of each person's arc and kind of pick and choose elements. So, it was a long journey, and that was only one step along the way. But it was kind of cool to see, like, we had we essentially had a movie for each character, and then we kind of further consolidated that.
Wow. So special edition DVD is or Blu-ray, I'm sorry.
If you guys feel the need to send us the uncut version of the Levertons, we will sign non-disclosure agreements for everybody.
Okay. So a lot of that footage, and I guess since this was pre-recorded, I don't know. Presumably all this can be knowledge, but originally the Levertons were being followed by a reality TV show director, and there was about a little over 100 hours of footage captured by them that was given to us, and the producing team had hired some assistant editors to go through all these different storylines. We were originally hired as assistant editors to work on the Greg Orman storyline. And so once we were promoted, essentially, we were given, these several hour long string outs of each character to work with. We had access to all the original footage, but like Raj said, it was this kind of iterative process of chipping away more and more at what wasn't the film. So it actually turned into something that we could digest a lot more than I was expecting to. If you had asked me, producers, if we could handle this, I'm not sure I would have said yes. I really appreciated the vote of confidence, but it was just not something we'd ever done before, and we really appreciated the opportunity.
That's like the official editor's statement. It's like, I don't know. So let's go. We'll see.
That's right.
We did. We had several assistant editors working on the various storylines and pulling all those pieces together. And, Aaron and Eleanor just kept bringing great stuff to the table and kept being wonderful to work with and all this sort of stuff. And the further into it we got, and we were working with other editors that were going to maybe be the full editor, and then that wouldn't necessarily work out. The visions weren't always aligned, and these guys were like kind of with us and just kept pumping out great material and always being available and always being ready to be able to like put together the pieces that we really needed in order to make this movie, that it would just became a no-brainer to say, hey, let's forget about it. Let's not search for other editors. Let's just like go with who knows the project right now and bring them along with us and make them feel a big part of this and take ownership of this project along with us, because they're really putting it up there, and it was really something special. So
awesome. I know, Sol, you said that editing was kind of happening as production was going on. So I know, Eleanor, Aaron, it's probably hard to calculate this, but roughly, like, how long would you say post-production took?
Eleanor tracked down our first email about this. It was March of 2019 is when we were sent an email to initially be brought on board. So, and apparently post-production had initiated in some capacity prior to that email being sent. So I can't answer beyond that, but still it's coming up on 2 years now for us.
Okay. Awesome. To piggyback on what Sol said, guys, always remember this. The best ability is availability. Don't let everybody tell you any differently. With that being said, what I wanted to know was, like, again, I've seen him, watching him edit is like watching Tom Cruise in Minority Report. It's like things moving all over the place. I'm like, hey, you got to go. I'll be back in a few hours. Go get him. So I wanted to know for you guys, I heard you say that you kind of had an idea to do a documentary like this before, but it never materialized until you guys got the call to do this. So it sort of became a passion project. So let me ask you this. What did the process look like? Was there an outline to kind of paint by the numbers, or was there more freedom in choosing how you guys wanted to piece things together? Because like you guys said, you're talking about over 250 hours of raw footage plus stock footage, and then you have Sol and Raj and everybody.
There's so many ways it could have
It's so many ways. Yeah. I mean, so what was the process like?
Oh my God. There are so many. Raj can account, and Sol too can account to this. I don't know how many times it was like, okay, we're super close. This is going to be the movie. And then we would get there, and then we would all watch it, and then we would go back and edit again. It was like over and over.
Everybody back to one. Everybody back to one.
So on your desktop, we will see Reunited States final.
Seriously effing final this time. This is it.
I do have to say for this one though, I mean, like I've done, I don't know, maybe 10 feature documentaries, and every other one we had probably like a year or 2 years of being finished. And like being finished again and submitting to festivals and being like, oh no, wait, we're not quite done. And we thought we were there. And the filmmakers just want to be done, and you want to be done, but you're not. And the movie tells you when you're done, And to be honest, with this one, it was actually, despite the fact that, yes, that happened several times, it still was kind of ahead of the curve on that front, and not to the point of like, we submitted, we blew all of our opportunities at big festivals because we submitted super rough cuts and things like that just what, yeah. So just on that front, yes, it was long and challenging and difficult, but we were able to keep it actually in a better situation than many documentaries are.
I agree. I definitely agree with that.
All right. So in documentaries, we've become accustomed to things being cut out, rearranged in a way that veers away from reality to serve the narrative or to better serve the narrative of the film. So, Eleanor, Aaron, how do you hold yourselves accountable to remain true to reality while still creating a compelling story in post?
For me, it's if we're having this conversation, then we're ahead of the curve. And we're always having this conversation. The conversation is never over, if that makes sense. But I wanted to give Eleanor the opportunity to say something.
Yeah, well, partially I think the subjects and the context and also the team for this documentary were especially helpful for that challenge because everyone was so committed to the mission of the documentary and wanting to spread this experience that they'd had, but then also committed beyond their own. I mean, it is not comfortable to be on camera and have people see whatever it was you did in that moment that you didn't plan to do. And so I know that there were some conversations with the characters with situations that maybe they weren't like, that wasn't my best self just then, do we have to include it? But because they believed in the mission so much, because I think we were all constantly having this conversation about it's more important that we get out the reality. And even if a situation is a little uncomfortable, that's still a really important side to show. It made it easier for us. We weren't battling and we were trying to like make them look really bad or do the like.
Everyone was on the same team. So we weren't in this awkward situation needing to create something that the person that we were
like lure them out.
Right. We weren't trying. Right. So it was kind of easy to like, what makes the film looks good is what makes the characters look good is what make everyone look good. But also
also being really vulnerable. The characters were willing to be, I think, really vulnerable. And I think that really shows when you watch.
No, I was supposed to say, I think you guys answered my question. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to ask you guys, what was the number one priority when it came to putting this film together? Because as you know, sometimes being an editor, you're asked to cook the food, but you don't get to shop for the groceries. Thankfully, Sol and Raj provided you guys with some very good vegan, healthy food here to serve the country. So with that being said, I was going to ask what was your priority? And it seems like if I'm hearing it was to make sure that you guys not only pay homage and tell a story, but also respect these characters because, again, it's rolling 24/7. They're not used to it. So what was the priority for you guys putting this together?
Okay, so there's that. And then there's also a couple of things. The other thing is acknowledging the audience. You know, we're talking to an audience here. This is a film that's, you know, the wildest dreams of everyone on the team is it to serve as an important wake-up call for America to do some soul searching and see the neighbor and everyone around them or something like that. Mm-hmm. So in the idea of, we know that we want to make it inspiring, but not at the expense of truth, you know, and this is the footage that we have to work with. And yes, these are all flawed characters to some degree, and some of the things that they say, you know, are really in support of this kind of group message we're trying to send, but at the same time, it's not like they all go to conventions to talk to one another or whatever. So they're all saying different things. It's a different, you know, the idea of it being a bridge building movement, but to some extent it was kind of like, we're trying to you know, to thread all these separate storylines together in a way that makes it seem like they're more than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, partially what we're trying to talk about here is all of the different perspectives that exist that come from real genuine experience in America are coming from a place of real experience. And so we're trying to take people's genuine opinions and experiences and share those with other people that maybe share those or maybe don't, and encourage people watching the film to go out and listen to whatever it is that is the experience outside of your own. So when we're trying to do that, there is so many perspectives and so much experience that we're all trying to cram down into this one film that's going to kind of just be one perspective. And so we really tried to include as many voices and as many, not all of our characters necessarily had the same vision for their path that they would take to reunite the country. And so we wanted to include all of those different perspectives, even if one of them might be seeming to say go and reunite two parties and work together that way, or go make your own party and be an independent. You know, I think that we're really trying to find all those perspectives and bring them together.
And also balance the fact that there is a whole slew of characters that were cut out of this film. I mean, in terms of, I don't know if y'all talked about this, but there's a series that's, my understanding is to be released.
We did talk about it, Aaron. The Everyday Heroes series. We did talk about it, but yeah.
Okay, so dealing with all of that, and in all honesty, dealing with all that footage, all of this kind of looking into the nitty gritty of all of these different elements of division and modes of reuniting, I think really helped us in our perspective. It's not just a matter of looking at Susan Bro footage and Greg Orman footage and how do they relate to one another, but what is, you know, the academic Rob Willer set out the nature polarization, and how can we take those lessons and apply them to the edit of the film so everything is internally consistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you guys did a fantastic job, and I want to end the interview with one segment. And again, if you guys could stick around for about 15 more minutes, we'll wrap it up with everybody's final thoughts. But this last question I have for you guys is this is just for like the 2.3% of people out there that are going to give
geek.com.
What software and machine do you use for your editing?
Well, this project was advertised as an Adobe Premiere Pro project, and so we that's I think one reason why we got the gig is because it's not necessarily as common in Hollywood.
Don't talk yourself down.
You know, and I just, we just worked on my MacBook Pro 2019 with external monitor and my mouse and keyboard, And Ben also brought his computer over. He has an iMac, and so we did double editing at times.
Multiple computers, Ben over there making notes.
Yeah, we had little work parties in our office.
Proprietary editing software. It's incredible.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we know.
Hey, Adobe doesn't sponsor TTFT, but
hey, Adobe or die, man.
But I stand by them, especially Final Cut. What the hell did they do with Final Cut X? Like it's pretty much iMovie plus.
Oh wow.
So we're really into it. I don't know. I think it's like to each their own.
Yeah.
Are there editors?
Wedding videos.
Oh,
All right. All right. Let's move on to Room for Improvement. Before we get into the broader aspect of the Room for Improvement of what this movie means to the world or the country and how it could help, what improvements we'd like to see there, I want to speak specifically about the film too. So you guys saw this movie in your head before, for like Sol, Raj, before cameras even rolled, Eleanor, Aaron, before one cut was made. There's no escaping having this like vision of what this is going to look like when it's done. So, and then during production, during editing, whether it be time or money, sacrifices usually end up being made because, I'm just wondering if there's anything in the film where it's just like, if we had a little bit more time or a little bit more money or a little bit whatever, this would have been done or that would have been done. Is there anything like that stands out to you?
I think one conscious effort we made from the very kind of early part of the process was to try to include as many perspectives and voices from points of view of color, as well as points of view of just general diversity. And I think we got there, but I think there was always a conscious desire to do even more there. So, that's where I think, we kind of looked at the film and we realized that it does work quite effectively especially in the sense of our target audience, right? That kind of moderate and especially, maybe like center whites and, maybe slightly more conservative leaning whites and so on. So I think it makes sense, the kind of the way that the characters are structured and the kind of composition of their backgrounds. But I do think that, if we had infinite more time, infinite more money, we might try to kind of get some more diverse points of view in there, maybe have another main storyline of a person of color, for example. So I think there was a conscious effort to go down that path. We achieved some of it, but I think we would have liked to have done more.
You always do a sequel. Reunited again.
Yes, still reunited. Yes, very, very
Hopefully
good.
we'll just be reunited this one time and it'll be great and we don't have to have a sequel.
Yeah, very true. Very good point. So that's actually a perfect segue. So someone just finished watching the Reunited States. Can you guys talk about the Heal America pledge and what you would say is the most productive first step forward after watching the film?
I mean, a productive first step forward, I think is engaging in conversation. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Like, how do we find a way to engage in these conversations with people we care about that we might disagree with, and find ways to listen to what they have to say. I mean, that's really where what this all comes to is like, how can I talk to my uncle who is a complete opposite in every way to me, and yet I can still find love and compassion and admiration for him in some way? How can I do that? And really, that's kind of the core essence of what we're trying to do.
And a bit more detail on the Heal America pledge. So one thing we wanted to come up with is kind of one nice, concise, pithy statement that captures the essence of the change that people can embody in their lives, and something that we can start to get trending, start to go viral, something that we can kind of rally behind. And also, not only were many of our financial backers like prominent institutions like Democracy Fund or the Civic Health Project, organizations that are kind of leading authority figures in the civic bridge building movement. So we had a lot of these organizations that we were partnered with, but in addition to that, we partnered with more than 50 other bridge building organizations, folks like the National Institute for Civic Discourse, or the Braver Angels, or Living Room Conversations. And we needed a kind of a pledge statement to rally behind. So if you go to our website, www.reunitedstates.tv, you'll find not only polls for tools for depolarization and more information about the movie, and there's a really nice set of kind of animations that we have, and you can kind of take this like guided course and guided tutorial on how to depolarize yourself in your communities and your families. And you can kind
awesome.
Yeah. The website's great. I mean, like Van Jones loves the website, and he talked about it on The View, and he said it was the kind of one of the first instances of where he's seen like actual tangible tools that people can apply in their lives. So that's all on the website, but also where I was going with this is on the website is our pledge. And the pledge is, I commit to the mission of healing America. I will resist demonizing those I disagree with, and instead listen to understand their concerns. I embrace my responsibility to reduce hostility because I believe our shared future depends on it. That's the pledge. And we recently held our red and blue carpet premiere last week, where we had guest stars like Van Jones and Meghan McCain and Alyssa Milano. And we ended that very powerful kind of 1.5 hour journey with dozens of people committing to taking the pledge. And now we're starting to get the pledge out on Twitter. So that's where the hashtag Heal America pledge, you might see trending, and you might see people taking the pledge. So that's what that is.
That's fantastic. And who could disagree with that sentiment? I mean, in their right mind.
Well, in their right mind. I think you said it the right way. In their right mind. Thank you. Yes.
Eleanor and Aaron, do you have anything to say as far as that goes? As far as what you think the best first step forward to be? And Raj, perfect. I mean, again, just the website is a fantastic resource for being a hub to take anything that you wanted to do with this movie into action.
Two things for me. One, just again, shout out to that awesome website. We only saw it for the first time like last week or so when we were driving down from her family's place in Virginia to my family's place in Florida, and it was just like I wasn't expecting something so good, really, because
it's about more than just the film. It really gets
exactly
what you can do. It has a lot of tips,
and it's based on, my understanding is it's based on the workshops of Braver Angels, who we've highlighted in one of these Everyday Hero series. So it's based on real sociological and psychological research, and so I don't know, it's just really cool to be a part of that. And the one thing I'd say about moving forward, at least for me personally, is my biggest takeaway is don't write people off. You know, people can change, and people have experiences that you couldn't have even fathomed. And it's just a matter of taking time to discuss with them and listen.
I think that's a perfect segue. One thing that I want to bring up that I think Raj mentioned it, and Sol, you mentioned it earlier, and you guys saying it now. To me, one of the things when I looked at this film, and again, I'm always honest, and he'll tell you this is about things that we try to do, is that I looked at this, and the first time I watched it, I'm like, to me, at the end, I was honest with myself. I said it comes off tone deaf. But then I said, you know what? Give it 24 hours. Go back and look at it again and ask yourself, who is it for? Research the people who've done it, and then ask yourself, has it reached its target audience? And then what happens afterwards? And so what you guys just said is exactly what I researched. Was the second time watching the film again, I'm like, okay, now I feel full, but I'm not. But I still I want my dessert. What do we do next? The question kept coming to me. I hear the conversation. Everybody's talking, but where is the action? We've all heard it our whole lives. Actions speak louder than words, and Raj just said it, and you guys just said it. This isn't just a website for the film. This is a place where people can go, let's have the conversation. What do we do with this? We've had the conversation. Now that we've had that, let's have the action. And I think by you guys doing that, this is no longer just a documentary or a film. It's usurped its way into the fabric of reuniting America, if you will.
Yep. So we are going to wrap it up here. In closing, I would just like to first thank everybody for being a part of it. Sol, thank you very much for taking the time in the tent and managing to connect to this and putting this together for me and coordinating everything. So in closing, if we could just go, and maybe we can go Eleanor, Aaron, Raj, and then Sol. Any final words that you'd like to say to close us out with, and if you have any projects coming up that you'd like people to know about, please feel free to mention those. And you guys that are watching this, check out reunitedstates.tv and watch the film on Amazon Prime. With that being said, Eleanor, please, whatever final words you would like to leave us with.
I'll go first. That's okay.
Okay.
Just I wanted to respond to what you said just now, or just a second ago, because, okay, so I was browsing Reddit about a week ago, and someone posted something about Britney Spears' dad lost a court case where now he has to share conservatorship with trust company or something like that. And I haven't seen the documentary. I don't know much about the Free Britney hashtag or whatever, but someone commented, isn't it crazy that in America, we need to have a documentary made to make any change happen? And I don't see any documentary as being a
encapsulation of the conversation.
An encapsulation of the conversation or guarantee for any type of change whatsoever. It's just to get the ball rolling, something to get into the public consciousness so people can start talking about these things, hopefully in a productive way. And hopefully that's what the dessert is from this film, because but then again, I was satisfied working on it anyway. So it's great to be a part of something. This is now like our after dinner aperitif or whatever, which is great to be a part of.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Raj.
Eleanor.
I'm sorry. Eleanor.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was gonna say that another thing that I run into a couple times with people that have trouble with this idea of reuniting, bridge building, because to them it correlates maybe compromise, or maybe if you're going to have conversations with someone that you disagree with, does that mean that you're sacrificing your own moral standing or what you believe in? And I think what I find is a very important aspect that is discussed a lot in the film and worth remembering is that bridge building isn't compromising, it's respecting the other person enough to have that conversation. And if you are going to change anyone's mind, if we are going to get anywhere that you want to go together, you have to have conversations with people that disagree with you and understand where they're coming from so that they can understand where you're coming from so you can do something that works for both of you. And until we do that, we're just going to keep in our separate little bubbles, making the world worse for each other.
Yeah, that's very well said. Bill Maher said something. He says it often on his show, which is why I like him. He's like, we have to live together. There's no getting around that. There's also no getting around the fact that we are going to have differences. So if we can't learn to appreciate those differences, to live with them, and to work together, then we might as well just pack it up now.
Well, and if you're going to quote Bill Maher real quick, I must quote Paul Mooney. Okay. Listen, kids, we're either going to hang together or we're going to hang apart, but we all going to hang. So let's get it together. Raj.
I love that. I would just say, watch the film. We would love your feedback. The film is available across all major streaming platforms, including all major cable and satellite providers like Spectrum and Dish TV and Amazon and iTunes. And so check out the film. We would love your feedback. And again, visit the website www.reunitedstates.tv. It's a tremendously well-designed, kind of a nice resource set of resources where you can kind of learn more about the movement. You can learn more about all these different organizations that are all doing different things. You can get involved. You can get more information about the film. You can take the pledge. And yeah, we would love to hear from you. We're very active on social media. We're literally responding to people who are tweeting about how they can't find the film. We literally respond to them individually one by one. So we would just tweet about the film, and we would love to hear what you think. I mean, the film is the start of a conversation. It's not the end of the conversation.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Thank you. How about you, Sol?
Take us home, Sol. Peace, love, and soul.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, it's been a really inspiring project to be involved with, and that, people like Ben and Aaron and Eleanor and Raj to work with, and to see their dedication and their devotion to, not just a film, but to a mission is something that's really inspiring. And then I would ask you as the viewer, what are you doing to make the world a better place? Like, and what's your goal with that? And if you're not sure, or if you're aren't doing anything or any of those things, just watch the film. Check it out and see if there's something that inspires you to do one little thing. It doesn't have to be a lot. We don't need a lot to make the world better. The world's pretty darn good in a lot of ways. There's some crap out there for sure that we got to sort out, but there's a lot of great things going on. And if we can all just do a little bit more, it's going to get better. And as all of us that are parents, especially for our kids and for the next generation that's out there, we have a responsibility to do whatever we possibly can, not just a little, but it starts with a little. So take action, do something. And watching this movie is a good way to start if you're not already on that path.
Fantastic final sentiments to send us off with. Thank you very much. And Sol, Raj, Aaron, Eleanor, thank you guys so much for your time and having this conversation with us.
I'll be visiting that website tonight. So you'll have one other view tonight. I'll be making sure to get to my dessert. Hey, I just had dinner. Why not have dessert? Come on, guys. Come on.
And thank you guys for making the film. You did a great job.
Yes, guys. Thank you so much again. Listen, guys, you didn't know us from Adam, and we appreciate you guys coming on. We're going to do right by you guys. I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out the show, but literally, we truly love film. And this is one of the times where we've had our most honest conversations about what's really going on with society. We haven't covered enemy of the state or anything like that. So this is like the most political or apolitical we've ever gotten. And we thank you guys for coming on. You respected us. We respected you. And that's what this is all about. I think America can learn something from this conversation. So thank you guys so much.
And you people on the YouTubes, check us out. Next episode, we'll be covering Coming to America. All right.
It's so much changed.
Thank you, guys. Have a great, is it the weekend? Is that appropriate? Have a great rest of your week.
Have a great rest of 2021. May it be better than 2020. Thank you, guys.
Yes. End of that.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.